way we often talk about immigration in the United States is as if it's people coming across U.S. borders from essentially nowhere. There's no understanding of the ways in which the United States is already a presence in the lives of many immigrants. And I think that if we were to pay more attention to issues of U.S. foreign policy, of U.S. military intervention, of the ways that U.S. economic policies sometimes impact immigration, we would end up with a very different and I think a much richer and livelier debate. 1965 establishes the first hemispheric caps on immigration. So it basically establishes there's going to be a hemispheric quota for Latin American immigration. And that turns out to be a huge problem, both for policy and for immigrants, because, of course, just because the United States passes that policy doesn't mean that the labor demands are going to go away on the U.S. side, and the chain migration networks that are happening between the U.S. and Latin America are going to go away. And so really the 1965 Act, on the one hand, moves the United States away from an explicitly racist system, but it also paves the way for the contemporary dilemma of undocumented immigration. In a lot of respects, we have the discussion about immigration and the economy exactly reversed. That there's a way that Americans often talk about immigration as if the United States is doing this enormous favor to immigrants by letting them in. But in fact, you can really see immigrants as playing the crucial role in the U.S. economy and really subsidizing American consumer society in really important ways with their labor, with their consumption, with the taxes they pay. Oftentimes they can't receive those taxes back in benefits. I think what's really striking, given the fact that most people will agree that immigration, in terms of net economic growth in a society, contributes much more than it extracts, what's really striking is the ways in which immigration can be demonized and scapegoated. The question for me is not whether the United States can or should stop immigration. I feel like immigration is going to continue to happen because the United States doesn't exist apart from the rest of the world. I think we're seeing that in Europe too. Europe doesn't exist apart from the world. I think the question is whether American immigration policy is going to punish and stigmatize and marginalize the people that are going to be coming here, or whether it's going to treat people that will be arriving and their families in a spirit of justice. Well, I feel like Trump is symptomatic of larger developments in American politics over the last couple of decades. I feel like on the one hand, we've seen the intensification of a kind of media-driven celebrity that intersects with politics in a very dynamic way, and I think in a way that has really impoverished American politics in important ways. There is a politics of white male resentment that Trump clearly channels, expresses, cultivates, and he's not the inventor of it. It's very much the direction that the Republican Party has been moving over the last 20 years as it tries to fight a set of rearguard actions against more inclusionary democratic politics, one that in which women are playing a much more active role in politics, in which young people are getting involved, and in which people of color are getting involved. And so when I hear Trump, what I hear in part is the voice of a certain kind of angry desperation about how to put together a conservative coalition that binds together the wealthy with people who don't share a lot of interests with the wealthy, including many poor white people. And unfortunately, one of the directions that has taken, really going back to the civil rights era, has been an angry politics of white male resentment. And I think when you see Trump attacking Mexicans and Mexico, attacking women, and using a very tough talking language about being an outsider, being an independent, I think we see a lot of that kind of rage and desperation coming through. And I think there's a large percentage of the Republican base that is attracted to that language. When we talk about race in the United States, we often narrowly think about it as a black-white issue. But race has always played a major role in debates about who should come into the United States on what terms and with what rights. Going back to the founding of the country, so the 1790 Naturalization Act, which establishes the terms for who can become a naturalized citizen, says you have to be free and white. And so it's right there at the beginning that race is built into the definition of who can come over. There's an interesting way that the debate on immigration, on the one hand, is highly racialized, but also that a lot of that racism gets expressed through the language of the law. And so the word illegal is used really not as a legal category in a technical sense. It's actually used to indicate in a kind of dog whistle fashion to signal, when people talk about illegals, it's very explicitly the intention of politicians, journalists, writers who use that term not to convey Canadians moving across into Maine, right? That's not what they're trying to communicate. Now, the fact that that there's that kind of legal cover for racism, I think, is a really important part of its success and kind of the ways in which anti-immigrant politics have gone mainstream in a way that conventional racism is harder to put over on the American people at this point. But I also think it's very thinly veiled, and I think most people can acknowledge very quickly that when politicians talk about illegals, it's essentially a racial category, that they're talking about black and brown migrants who many white Americans are really uneasy with.